This little piece right here could literally change the course of this build for a very long time and really make it a pain in the butt. What this
Holy shit! The car was even celebrating. Well guys, we are at the Ford dealership. It has been 5 weeks, I think, without my truck. So that's why we've been slacking a little bit on the content, because basically the car's been in the trailer. I can't move it without my truck. It's just too big. And we're finally here picking up the rig. Look at that, guys. Finally happy to have this thing back. Oh man, they even cleaned it up a little bit for us. Man, it feels great to drive this thing, but you know we have to test this brand new transmission with a big fat burnout, right? All right, you guys think it'll do it? Oh yeah, there we go, baby. Oh yeah, approved. Check it out, guys. As you guys saw in the last video, the shop is all cleaned out. Brand new toolboxes in here, brand new Viper chair. We are locked and loaded to get the blue turd in here. This is the first time it's been out of the trailer since PRI, because I've had a broken tow rig, I've had a broken red car, I've had a broken everything. Literally everything I own is broken, and it's all fixed now over the course of about 5 weeks. I got my daily driver back, we got the dually back, and the blue turd's hitting the garage. Getting back to the blue turd, we have to pull the engine and transmission out of this, because as you guys know, this thing doesn't run, unfortunately. This motor we basically put in here as a mock-up motor. It is the brand new Billet one-off custom block that we had made in Australia, and we basically got everything in there to where it looked running and driving, but it is very far from running and driving. So what do we need to make this thing running and driving? Well, we need pistons, we need rods, we need valves, we need head gaskets, and because of 2021 and 2022 and 2020, whatever the excuses are, it's getting really hard to get parts. I have everything on order, but there's only so much you can do with parts delays. But our goal today is to get the engine and transmission out of this thing, because there's one piece that could make or break and make us basically redo 50% of the work that we did up in Long Island, New York at Bill Draghi's Chassis Works. And that's an $11 little piece could really just destroy everything we did. What this little ring is this is a pilot bushing, and the K-Series transmission obviously uses this little pilot bushing. The SHO transmission never had a pilot. In fact, I got one over here. Let me show you what we're working with. So this is an SHO transmission. This is actually the one we use to go 8 seconds on. And right here on the end of this input shaft, there's basically, it's flat. So right here we got a stock SHO crankshaft, and this is a K-Series input shaft. And like the SHO transmission had, like I was telling you guys, it was flat after the splines. Well, this little ring, the pilot, goes on the end of this to keep the crankshaft and the transmission basically in line with each other. If we made the adapter plate wrong, or my measurements not correctly as far as the depth and the spacing of everything, basically this would go in the back of the crank, and our input shaft could go here, or here. Or even worse, if I measured it wrong, instead of this bushing sliding all the way into the input shaft, we may have not gotten the depth correctly, and this ring will bottom out on these splines. So as you can see, these very little small $11 ring is pretty important. So for mock-up, just to make sure that we did this correctly, this is the back of an SHO crankshaft, and now we have this little ring that we machined right into the back of the crankshaft. Now this is not the crankshaft we're going to be running, but this is something we can drop into the motor and see if everything actually lines up correctly. And that's what the goal today is get everything out of the car, make sure that we got the spacing and the ring and everything correct, and at the same time, once we get everything apart, it's time to start building a motor, building a transmission, and getting this thing to a track. So let's get started. So there is a huge change to how I used to work on this car versus how I'm going to have to work on it now. Every time I have done an engine or a transmission job, I've always pulled everything right out of the top with an engine hoist. And because of the way we set this thing up with a mid-plate and a motor plate, and how long it got by adding a dry sump as well as a spacer to the K-series, it's just gonna be way too difficult to pull this thing out of the top. So I've been doing some brainstorming over the past week of how can I make this thing fast to pull everything out of the bottom, because you know, if we go to the racetrack and we have to do some clutch stuff or some transmission stuff, we need to get everything out of it really fast. So this is the idea I came up with. I'm out of breath because this is a 1,000-pound hydraulic table cart. Went over to Harbor Freight. They had these things really cheap. They were like 350 bucks. I'm sure they're made in China. Gotta be. Oh yeah, there it is, made in China, unfortunately. But to get anything that was made in the USA was a few $1,000s, so that sucks. It's 1,000 pounds of capacity, so I'm pretty sure this engine transmission combination is not going to be 1,000 pounds, but even if it is, it'll probably be fine. So I am going to have to modify it because this is kind of how this goes. It's supposed to basically be up here, and I'm pretty sure this handle is going to be in the way. So I'm probably just going to end up cutting this off and taking the release handle and mounting it down here. But we should be able to slide this thing underneath the whole transmission and engine, and then simply just pump this up. And what I can do is I can make some plates, you know, maybe like some receivers for the subframe that will hold the subframe on this pad, and we don't have to worry about it sliding off. And then once it's time to come down, you just pull the handle and this thing comes down. So that's at least the idea. Hopefully this investment, you know, plays out, but I think it should work just fine. All right, guys, so we're gonna crawl up under the car since a lot of you guys have not been able to get this site yet. Since we basically built it, we got our Honda K-series transmission right there. But when we come under here, we still use the factory subframe bolt locations. So we have 4 of those on all the perimeter. And then we will have to unbolt the rack from the steering right there, because the rack bolts are underneath the subframe. So when we drop the subframe, the rack is going to have to drop down with it, which means we will be undoing the tie rods, the ball joints, undoing the exhaust, and then anything on the top side of the motor that obviously is not coming off. Now, one thing that we did do that was really cool when we built the subframe, or when Bill built this subframe, is that we integrated it into the chassis. And what we mean by that, if you look really closely, this is an interlocking joint. So you can actually see the separate colors because we had the subframe powder coated. And there is essentially 2 bolts that bolts this to the main roll cage, like the entire chassis. Like, so not only do we have 4 bolts going to the factory uniframe, but we also integrated this thing into the chassis to make everything really rigid. So just a little bit of science for you guys, for all of the chassis and fabrication nerds. All right, let's get started. Pull off our Vibrant HD clamps. No tools required. to do it. Could not do it one-handed, but we are able to get this piece off without removing the front end, which is pretty convenient. So now that we have the intake pipes and the exhaust pipes off, this thing looks like it's going to come out pretty easy. Height-wise, we'll see if we can get the intake basically underneath this frame rail, because now I'm kind of worried about the height of the cart with the height of the motor, being able to pull it out right. Yeah, now it should be as simple as undoing a couple of these oil lines and unplugging our Rhino wire harness, which is done. All right, so we're going to undo the tie rods, and we're going to undo this bolt right here for the steering. And then once we undo those bolts, we are able to undo the 4 subframe bolts and then the connectors that go to the actual chassis. And we are ready to drop this thing out of here. All right, guys, we are going to start getting this thing out of here now. We're going to go ahead and undo these secondary mounts, the ones that go to the chassis. That simple. So those are the 2 bolts for that. And, well, I guess this is the moment where we see if the size on this little, or should I say big hydraulic cart, is even gonna work. So I definitely see a problem already. This thing's too damn high. This car is gonna have to be like another foot or so in the air if I'm gonna be able to get the engine out from under it. But we gotta start and figure out how high we're gonna actually have to be able to go. As you guys can see, that was as high as my floor jack to get the car. And looks like we can only drop the engine maybe 8 inches. So back to the drawing board. All right, guys, and the other issue is we're not wide enough. We got the subframe bar right here, the other subframe bar right there, and as you see, the actual jack is not wide enough. So now we are gonna have to make some kind of like register, something that the frame can actually sit in to be able to unload it without it sliding off. I guess we have to get started on that. All right, so I took off to my local AutoZone, and this is what I think will be perfect. We can use this little piece out of an exhaust clamp to basically cradle the tube on the subframe like this. My thought is we can take this little piece, put that right there, weld it directly to it, and that actually is a perfect fit on that tube. Now I had to get 1 or 2 of them that were 1 7/8 inches, and then they didn't have any more of those, so I got 2 of those, and then I got 2 of 2 1/8. This is probably going to be a little bit sloppy, but it should still locate it and keep it from falling off. We'll just weld that thing directly to that, and hopefully that works just fine. Not the best TIG welder, but god dang, look at that MIG welder right there, boy. That was not sketch at all. It just totally dropped on me when I was not trying to have it drop. Looks like we came down a couple inches. Not really sure if this plan is going to work. That's a lot of inches. As you can see, we got the front bumper off, and I think this is definitely going to be the way we get the engine out of the car now. This is just going to be actually not that bad. I'm so used to having a radiator and I guess headlights, and you typically have a lot of stuff up here that is taking up room, and to pull it out this way would just be a pain in the butt, but it's really not. Oil lines have to be disconnected, so this is our oil filter over here. It has to be disconnected no matter what, so that's not even a big deal. The cold side and hot side have to come off. anyway, not a big deal. So all we have to do is basically unplug the exhaust gas back pressure right here and take the fuel tank out, which is sitting over there, which normally sits in this area. And then we should be able to undo these 4 bolts, these 4 bolts, and literally lift the turbo, the intercooler, the oil filter. All of this is bolted to this front support, and we should just be able to take it off all at once, just with those bolts. So when you build a car, you kind of really have to engineer this stuff to where it comes apart fast. Like, I don't want to have the gas tank out of the car every time if I have to do this. So maybe one day we will remake the fuel tank to where it bolts all up in here and we don't have to worry about undoing bolts right here to get to the fuel tank. That way we don't have to mess with it. We can leave the gas in the car. But all in all, this is definitely not terrible. So we're gonna go ahead, undo this, probably throw a floor jack or something to kind of catch this while I undo all the bolts, because it is gonna be kind of hard with only one person, but we'll figure it out. All right, guys, we are gonna talk real quick about today's sponsor because it is pretty fitting that Viper Chairs is coming in clutch right now, actually working on the car. This thing is super freaking comfy, guys. This thing is made in the United States, which I am a big fan of USA made stuff. And I mean, let's be honest here. What shop chair rolls like that? Like, that's insane. I barely push it and the thing has no rolling resistance. This is an amazing high quality chair, and you can get these things engraved with like your logo. So if you have a business or you're a detailer or a mechanic, you can have your logo or your name on these chairs. And there's tons of different styles. You can get them where they're low, get them where they're high. And I believe you can get $50 off their website right now. Check it out, guys, they're pretty sweet. But what I'm gonna be doing here with said Viper chair is I'm just going to, I'm gonna use it as a stand. We're gonna throw this Viper chair underneath this intercooler, and we're going to undo the last bolt right here, and hopefully that just kind of catches it a little bit. So let's try it. Oh, that was sketch. Oh my God, that was sketch. All right. Yo, Viper chair worked. Oh yeah. All right. Oh yeah. Oh, this worked out great. Whole thing just rolled right out. Check it out, guys. That is just freaking wicked. You had the entire billet block, dry sump, transmission, subframe, everything is right here. And I mean, it is sturdy. It is not going anywhere. We did a great job at making that. And I think this will work great at the track. So even the wiring harness that Rhino Wire made for us, just one turn, disconnected. So now it's time to yank this transmission off, yank that adapter plate off, and then transfer that to our other mock-up motor and make sure that that $11 ring didn't screw us. All right, now that we got everything blown apart, as you can see, we got our adapter plate here that adapts it to the K-Series. And I went ahead and took apart the billet bell housing from Drag Cartel because we're actually not going to be using that one because it has no bearings and such in it. But this one right here, like I showed earlier in this video, this is a used case where we have an input shaft. And now we got to get this thing thrown up here. And one real important step. Just using bolts alone on an adapter plate is not enough. So even if we have 6 or 8 or 10 of these bolts, you have to have what they call dowel pins. So these are factory K-Series dowel pins, and we run 2 of these in the bell housing. Basically, we have one right here, and then we have one right here. And this is essentially the guide that keeps this thing straight all the time. So we're gonna go ahead and install these dowel pins into this used housing. And we're gonna throw this up here and then make sure that the input shaft slides into this perfectly, and pray to God that we got the depth and measurements and everything correctly, because this could get really bad really fast. Now, we should be able to put this up here and not even have bolts in it. Just the dowel pins alone should be able to hold the weight of this. Just like that, guys. Check that out. Dowel pins are holding that perfectly. All right, guys, here we go. Moment of truth. As you guys can see, deep inside there, you can see the flywheel, and then you got the center of the crankshaft about right there. And what we need to be looking for is this tip of that shaft going right into the crank, not hitting any edges, being perfectly centered, and being the correct depth, because if it goes too deep, it's going to hit on the splines right here, and if it doesn't go deep enough, then we don't have enough for our bushing. So you guys are seeing it live. All right, 3, 2, freaking perfect, guys. That's awesome. So we have officially, well, not really officially, but that's probably the largest part to getting a Honda K-Series trans to work on this thing, and we knocked it out. So the adapter plate works, the correct thickness will work. We now will have a pilot bushing in the back of the crank, a factory Honda K-Series pilot bushing, so that all looks great. The only thing we have to do now to make sure this will work 100% is get the clutch pack on and make sure that the clutch pack, the disc, and everything rides perfectly on the splines, and then making sure that the clutch height is good for the throwout bearing, because there is still a chance that, you know, the splines right here and where the flywheel is, that the splines for the disc aren't going to really ride where they need to be. I don't think that's the case. I should have measured everything correctly, but there still is a chance. So let me show you what we got for that. I ordered this quite a long time ago, but our guys at Clutch Masters was definitely taking care of us. We've always used a Clutch Masters clutch, and what we have here is a 725 twin disc. Basically, there's 2 floaters in here, and then 2 discs, 7¼ inches, and it's the same clutch I've been using. The only difference here was that that flywheel is a stock SHO style flywheel, but we basically cut it thinner to make room for this. We're gonna throw this on here and make sure that the splines are all perfect, and then on top of that, we need to get a measurement to see how far is this clutch from where the throwout bearing is gonna be right here, because our throwout bearing has to be able to push down on this, and we got to make sure that the clearance is correct. And we're able to see that the splines basically just go to the very edge of the disc, like right on the back side. You know that the back disc, it's kind of hard to see on the camera. You can see that the back disc has full thread engagement, basically like right there, right? So obviously the front one's gonna have full thread engagement or spline engagement. So now that we got the Clutch Masters clutch on, let's go ahead and throw that bell housing back on, and let's make sure that this clutch is gonna work. All right, so let me tell you exactly what we got going on, guys. I've got the input shaft put in there, and what I did is I bottomed it out on the crank without the transmission on it, just to see where the stopping point was. Got a measurement from this to that adapter plate, because we know this is all square. And then I put the transmission back on, put the input shaft back in to where it's gonna be sitting at when it's running, and got another measurement from here to here. And that difference was 63 thousandths. So that means when we take this off, or take this transmission off, and then we put this back in here, if we pull this 63 thousandths of an inch out from bottom, then that's gonna be where our height is, so we can check to make sure the splines are on the input shaft correctly. So now that the transmission bell housing is off, we'll throw this in here. There we go. Now see, that is bottomed out right there. So now we just got to pull this out 63 thou, and then we'll be able to see exactly where the splines are running. And we got our measurement from here to here of 63 thou. So we just need to pull this out. I mean, just very small amount. About right there. That looks like about 60 thou. You can see the splines. We do have some of the splines overhanging it, but I don't think that'll be an issue since we have like, I want to say an inch or 3/4 of an inch of spline on there. That should work just fine. So now we have to make sure that our clutch and throwout bearing package is going to work, but I don't know if we're going to be able to do that because I plan on using an internal slave cylinder and I don't actually own one of those. So I don't really know how thick it is. I imagine that it should work because a K-series transmission, we're using all factory K-series stuff. So basically the spacing from the disc is not changed at all from the throwout bearing on a regular Honda. Theoretically, this should all work just fine, but of course we don't know because all of this crap is custom. But this right here definitely makes me feel a lot better because this could have been bad, like really bad, like us going back to New York bad. But luckily, Bill's a freaking animal. He killed the adapter plate. Thank you to Drag Cartel for the billet bell housing, Speed Factory on all the titanium hardware. That K-series transmission is going to be a monster when we get this thing built. And then, you know, we made the cart to get all of this out of here, and I think that's going to work out. I think it's just going to take some time of getting used to, it's going to take some time to get used to pulling it out of the bottom, and I'm sure I'll get faster with time. And that is going to be it for this video. That is all the updates I have right now. I think that was a good amount of talking about what we have technically on this. Now, we have a crap ton left to get done on the Blue Turd. I mean, we don't really have a running engine or a transmission with gears in it, and a lot of this is unfinished, but the hardest parts are done. So at least we're gonna have a lot of build videos, a lot of updates coming. So if you guys got any questions, if you guys have any specific type of information that you want to know, put it in the comment sections. I'll be glad to answer any questions about the car. Don't forget, subscribe, hit the bell icon. I know you hear it all the time from all the YouTubers. It helps out so much. Hit the bell icon, guys. Thank you. Have a good one. Catch you on the next video.